Hello, how are you today? October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month in the U.S., and here on Marketers on a Mission, it's Breast Cancer Awareness Week. My guest today, Lynne Hartke, has an unbelievable but true story. There is sadness in it, yes, but it's also full of faith and hope. You will be blessed this day. So, I'm Patricia Durkin, the Christian Message Coach, and this is Marketers on a Mission. We present marketing tutorials and interviews to help Christian writers and speakers take their message online. And in this week's case, to learn more about breast cancer. This is episode number 142, when 3 family members have cancer at the same time, with guest author Lynne Hartke. Hello, Lynne. How are you today?
Hello. Thank you so much for having me, Patricia.
You're very, very welcome. What I'd like to do is start off just by giving us a picture of life before breast cancer invaded. You were the first person in your family to be diagnosed with breast cancer, correct?
I was the very first person, and we were just a busy household like most of us are. My husband's a pastor, and we had 4 kids, 2 grown out of the house, but 2 still in high school. So doing that thing that parents do with high school kids, running all over the place. And I was also on staff at the church as a worship pastor. And so, yeah, just busy time.
My head is exploding at what I imagine your schedule was. So tell us about Diagnosis Day, please. What part of that do you want to share with us?
Well, my cancer was caught by comparing a new mammogram with the one I'd had a year before, and that there had been changes. And so the doctor wanted me to have a biopsy done. And so I had that done, and then, just waiting, that horrible waiting that we all do for results to come back. And I actually got a phone call from the doctor, and it wasn't her assistant, it was the doctor. And so just hearing her voice made me go, ooh, not good news. And, she told me on the phone, she said, yeah, it's positive for breast cancer. And my parents were with me at the time. And just, they're crying and I'm numb and thinking, I need to call my husband. And when I tried to call him, I could just sob. And I talk about cancer stole my words. And that was my initial response, just numbness and not even being able to talk about it right away.
Yes. And that's completely understandable. We're going to talk about your book in a little bit, but this is the book, Under a Desert Sky, and it's all about, it's not about your cancer journey. That's part of it, but it's about that love story between your parents and themselves, your family, you and God, and you and your husband, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. And it's about a legacy, even with a terminal diagnosis, which my parents were so determined to leave a legacy when their stories went in the way that they weren't planning on.
And they lived that legacy way before they got a diagnosis of cancer, didn't they?
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Your dad was an English teacher, and he was a little bit of a personality, wasn't he?
Yes, my dad was an English teacher all his life, and talk about the red pen he always carried. And my mom started teaching after we were raised. And she taught college-level classes for people that wanted to be medical secretaries. And transcriptionist was what she ended up doing. She did lots of things in between, but yeah. And so my dad was diagnosed next with melanoma, stage 4. And then my mom, while my dad was still in chemo, was diagnosed with ovarian cancer, stage 3, which quickly digressed to stage 4. And so there was that season when we were all being seen by oncologists, me in Arizona and my parents in Minnesota.
I wanted to mention that because as you were supporting them, and you have 3 siblings, right?
Yes.
Were you the one that lived furthest away from your parents at the time?
No, my brother lives in California.
Okay.
And then another sister in Colorado, and I have a sister in Minnesota, but she's 5 hours from my parents.
Oh, yeah. So everybody lived away, and they didn't have relatives. The children at a moment's notice. So you had to
No.
plan and schedule. And there was later in the conversation, we'll get to the part where that was a problem in the end, wasn't it?
Well, after my dad died from cancer and then my mom's health further deteriorated, we just started having conversations of, is it time to move mom to live with one of us? And my husband was actually the one who really pushed. He said, no one is going to be happy until your mom is with somebody. Because we were flying back all the time at a minute's notice, and we all were raising families. And so he said, I think we should have her move in with us. Someone has to do it, and why not us? And so, yeah, we moved mom to be with us for the end of her life then.
Mm. And your husband's name's Kevin, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And he walks all the way through the story, as it should be. But he lost his own parents to cancer. So this was not unfamiliar grief territory to him, was it?
Correct. Yeah, and it was hopeful to me also when I realized he's lived this hard story and has survived. And so even though it had been, a few years earlier, I could look at him and go, okay, there is life after impending loss. There is life after this grief, and there is life even in the midst of the hard. So I don't have to say just in the future someday, but in the midst of the hard of caring for my mom and watching my dad, there was beauty in that hard place. So
you have a phrase that is not coming to my mind right now. A beautiful.
Talk about difficult beauty.
A difficult beauty. That's so exquisite. Tell us about that, please.
It came actually by observing life in the desert, and that you have to look hard for beauty in desert. And I love hiking. Different so much from Minnesota and places that are just green all the time. But we live with different shades of brown most of the year. But if you look hard enough, there is life and beauty in that difficult, thorny place. And there's things that bloom actually year-round in the desert. You just have to have eyes to see it. And so that became just a picture that there is beauty in the barren place of cancer, in the thorny, just desert place, that in that hardness.
And your message and your book's message both illustrate that, even though it's directed and tells the story of breast cancer for you and cancer for your parents, we all have those dark days. We all have those times where it seems hopeless and there's not, life has stopped. I'm just waiting to die.
Yeah.
And your book and your message both, they serve both groups, don't they?
Yeah, it can easily be a story for anyone who is in a hard place. You don't have to just look at it as a cancer story, because we all have times where we question God. We all have times where we want to rewrite the story that's happening around us, where we don't want to be in the pages. And it's like, okay, what can I learn in these pages? How can I find faith, hope, and beauty in the season that I'm living in?
Since you were already surrounded by family, and even your parents visiting the very day that you were there in the yard and the doctor called, and you had the community, you were serving in the church, your husband was a pastor, I know you had tendrils everywhere, but still, did you feel isolated?
I think for all of us, when we are asking those tough questions, it sometimes just comes down to us and God. And it can be a lonely place. And I think we need to find peace with that within ourselves. And even when we're surrounded by people who love us, we still need to answer that question inside ourselves, or come to terms with maybe there's not an answer. And in the midst of that mystery, we can still find peace and knowing that God is bigger than even the questions that aren't answerable.
Very well said. I had an issue for 10 years, and many conversations with God, and no answers were forthcoming, no promise that it would change. And I had to find a way with his help. I couldn't have done it without him to answer the question, if nothing changes, will I stay true?
Yeah.
Many days on my deck, answering that question.
Yeah.
Your mom and dad, your mom was, your dad was diagnosed 14 months after your treatments, and your mom, is it 18? 18 months after his. Mm-hmm. Is that right? Have we got that time
yes.
right?
I think that's right, yes.
And how long did you have with him? He passed first, but was it a very close passing between both parents, time frame wise?
My parents died 9 months apart from each other. And so my dad did well with a clinical trial for a while. And he was willing to do it because he wanted to have as much time with my mom. I think he used to always say, I will live until I die. And then my real life will begin. And he would have been fine just not doing any treatment at all and go right to eternity. But he didn't want my mom to be a widow. And so he did all the clinical trials for her and pursued treatment longer than I think he would have otherwise.
On his own. We're going to talk a little bit about some resources and your vast knowledge that you have now as a result of having breast cancer and the opportunities that came your way as a result of that. But how does someone get into a clinical trial then? How do we find out about clinical trials?
You would talk to your oncologist because they have the most updated list of what is available. And usually a clinical trial has very specific things that they're looking at. I know my dad had to do some tests. I don't remember if it was blood work or what, that just and usually with a clinical trial, you have to still be improving. So if you get to the point you're not improving on a clinical trial any longer, usually then you're taken off. At least that was my dad's experience and other people that I have known who have been on clinical trials. And maybe someone else has a different experience, but that's what I found to be true.
Without getting into private matters that you don't want to share online, and I understand that. Did you and Kevin, your husband, did y'all have family insurance? And did your mom and dad, did they have insurance? There's a great financial burden we're talking about just for the medicine itself. I mean, the treatments and the process, not the back and forth trips to treatment, right. The back and forth trips to Minnesota. And there's a lot of expense involved.
Yeah, we thankfully had very good insurance at the time. And my parents also, they had supplemental insurance on top of their Medicare. And so they were very well cared for as well. So very thankful for that. But I know of people that really do struggle with even making the co-pays because they just keep adding up. So it's a definite need for people with cancer.
So if we know someone, love someone who has been recently diagnosed and or even if they've just been a patient, they don't have to be recently diagnosed. There are ways that we can help them financially, whether we do that anonymously or one-on-one, put a group together. That would be helpful. That would be a practical way to help them, wouldn't it?
Yeah, there's a lot of practical ways that we can help people with cancer. And I like to tell people, let kindness be your credential. Most people say, well, I'm not qualified. I can't do this. I can't do that. Well, let kindness be your credential and to realize that even small gestures make a difference. And that if you're picking up kids from a soccer practice or you're bringing over a meal that can be put in the freezer and used later, or you're helping with an electric bill, all these different ways are helpful for people. And it's usually better to ask and then offer something specific rather than just say, well, call me if you need anything. Because most people won't call. And they're already too overwhelmed trying to just put together the details of their own scattered story and take care of things on their end to try to think, well, how can I have my friends help? And people are, we don't like to ask for help either, right? So, think of practical ways you can help and then do it. Like call up and say, I'm going to the store. Can I get you milk? Can I get you 5 things?
One of the things that thought just slipped my mind. Maybe it will come back. We never know.
Yeah.
I like what you just said. It makes sense. And thank you, Lord. I was going to ask, were you and Kevin, even though you were surrounded by people and family and supporters and, what we would all hope for, were you good? You were servants professionally and personally. Were you good at accepting help from others?
I was terrible at first. The original title of my book was called Stupid Strong before they changed it. Just that I was stupid and how strong I thought I needed to be. And I had to learn. I had to learn to allow people to be kind to me and to realize that I didn't need to do it alone. And
was there a trigger event, or was it just a natural course of events that you learned that lesson?
I can't think of a trigger event. I think it just all one day, just like, I cannot do it by myself.
Has that trait carried over into your wellness now?
I am more likely to ask for help. I mean, I still tend to be pretty independent and come from a long line of independent women, but to realize it's a good thing to surround yourself with friends and to be there for each other. Yes. And it was actually my parents' friends who modeled that to me so well, because my parents went to treatment at Mayo in Minnesota, which was 70 miles from their home. And when anytime they were hospitalized, their friends drove there multiple times in the week to be there for them. And they did that for us when we were there staying with our parents. So they were loved well.
What a wonderful, wonderful experience, and wonderful thing to be able to say, isn't it? Going back to your hiking, I'm going to check Facebook in just a moment, see if we have any questions or comments. But, I mean, you were athletic to start with. This was not, you weren't somebody who had a history of bad habits and you had reformed and then you got cancer. You had pretty much made that choice for your own self personally long ago. And
yes.
Tell us about how much of a shock was it, in addition to all the obvious, how much was it when you knew, I've done all the right things and this has turned out wrong?
Yeah, that was a hard pill to swallow, because I was running sprint triathlons at the time I was diagnosed. I mean, just for fun. I wasn't professional or anything. We would joke it was a good way to scare us off the couch, because it's like, oh, we signed up for this race, we better work out. And it was more that type of exercise. But I felt, I tried to get enough sleep, eat the right foods, exercise. And there wasn't a history in my family. So it was a surprise.
And still it still happened. You and your husband also go, and your family as well. And you even, I get a mental picture of you sort of sometimes dragging people into the desert. Such avid hikers. And the story.
Yes, my children would agree with that statement, yes.
The stories in the book support that conclusion. And you found God there many, many, many times, individually and in a group, didn't you?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. I found God speaks to me through nature. And afterwards, when both of my parents died, and I struggled to find him in just the normal disciplines of our faith, I could still find him in his creation. And so he spoke to me probably first there. And I like to say the beauty of creation boomeranged me back to God.
The beauty of creation. So now tell me, please, what does it mean? Let me check Facebook super quick. And also, I'm interested in you telling us, what does it mean, Lynne, when someone that you care about has cancer of any kind, and they announce quietly, softly, that they're done? What does that phrase mean?
When I've had my parents say it and other people close to me, it usually means they're done with treatment, that they don't want to pursue any medical intervention, to let their bodies just be done. And it's a hard conversation, because usually family members are on different pages, and not everyone is ready to be done. But I try to tell people who have asked me about that since then, is you need to have those hard conversations as a family and to really listen to the person who's going through treatment.
And that's an important point, because some people might say that early on, but most of the time we're talking about people who have gone down this path. They know what they're giving up and what they're gaining.
Yes. Yeah, it's hard. It's a hard conversation. There's nothing easy about it. And I think we were created to fight death. I just think we were. It's part of our stamp as image bearers of God, that we're fighters of death. And we want to embrace life and live full lives, but to realize there is eternity and there is life beyond this life. And there comes a point that it's time to turn and embrace that.
And early on in your book, one of your friends, you had a meeting with her and she said these words to you, and your book is wonderful. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
I know that it's helping a lot of people and that will continue to help a lot of people. And the stories that you have, your giftedness shines through as a writer and a communicator. And I know that God has other messages for you to share as well. But it happened again. The thought has slipped my mind. So we're going to assume that wasn't needed. You said early on to, nope. Not yet, no. You had mentioned earlier also in your book, because the book in the first 3 chapters are about you and your treatment. The entire rest of the book is about the story of the aftermath and the parents and the coming to adjustments, and it's very, very rich, and it was very touching.
Thank you.
Did your parents have time to read? Did you write any of it, even the concept, before they passed? Did they have any knowledge of it at all?
A lot of, probably 50% of the book, at least in small bits, was in my blog. And my parents read a lot of that. And I used to ask them before I would post anything, I would send them the stories. And then they finally said, you don't need to send us the stories anymore. You can write about our family and our story as much as you want to. And it was a big turning point because, my dad was an English teacher. So he used to correct the stuff I wrote before and send it back to me. But then it was like, no. And I realized it was important for them that their story would be live on beyond them. That I was a witness. I was a witness to their story. And I think I talk about that in the book, is how we all need witnesses to our stories.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Good stuff. Let me check Facebook again, please. We're doing good. Now, I skipped ahead on my notes there, and I've mentioned what I was going to mention on that page. It's already gone. About all the right. 3 chapters you were. Had you written before? Had you contemplated writing if you had not written before? How did that come about?
I had dabbled in writing, but as a worship leader before I had cancer, I just didn't have enough creative space in my brain to do both and raise a family. And so I kind of shut the door to creative writing. But then after I had cancer, I felt God say, it's time to open that door again. And I took creative writing classes at a community college and began writing and started blogging a year after I was diagnosed and started writing every day then at that point.
You had, knowing the spirit that you have of service, does Christ bring people consistently into your life who want this conversation about breast cancer? Or are they basically, if we looked at it as a whole through the years, they're just in need of someone listening to them? Is it general ministry, if I can say it that way, which sounds condescending and I don't mean that way? Or is he still bringing to you people specifically who have cancer and or breast cancer nowadays?
I mean, I definitely have the general, but I have the specific every week because people know. I mean, I'm 9 years survivor. And because I teach classes at the Cancer Center and because I blog about it, and I'm just known as the person who is in the cancer community. So if anyone in my circle gets cancer or has a friend that gets cancer, they come and talk to me about it. Definitely every week I have those conversations.
And your circle is large because of all the things that were part of your life before cancer, and then the things that were added and the people that were added after or during
Yes.
cancer. But
Yeah.
tell us, how can we help a friend who comes to us and says, I've got to talk, and this is what she's facing now? What are some ways that we could help her?
First conversation is just, are there practical needs that they have? Do they need help with picking up kids? Do they need a ride to treatment? Do they need meals brought in? And I did want to mention something that friends of mine have done for someone that I know is newly diagnosed. They contribute money to a website called Grubhub, where then the person can order whatever they want to when it's a bad day and they can't cook. I know there's similar websites like that.
Yes.
And then the food is, delivered to your front door. So that's a great resource. And sometimes you just gotta do stuff even when they say they don't need anything. And this is a nice thing where you could just say, hey, send a little note. I donated this much money to this site. And when it's a bad day, you can order food. That's a good one. Sometimes they're very resistant. And then it's sending the encouraging text or just a card. Things like that. And then ask again in 2 weeks. And then ask again in 2 weeks.
Absolutely. Because we all, even if we aren't facing this issue, we all, when we're in our dark place, we need people not to give up on us. And at the same time, not expect just because they invited us that we're obligated to attend or to participate or to support. But keep asking. Keep asking. And it can be done very gently. It doesn't have to be in any way anything negative. Touching base, still thinking about you, wanted to ask you again, are you ready to go this time?
Yep.
It doesn't have to be a big deal. How did your husband, I know you're not going to speak for him, but he lost his parents, then you were diagnosed, then both your parents were diagnosed. I mean, that's a tremendous weight on anybody's shoulders. How did he deal with it?
He had his bad days as well. I mean, it's one thing to trust God with your own diagnosis. It's a completely different conversation to trust God with people that you love. I found that true with my parents compared to my own. And I know my husband found it true. It's one thing to have your parents, but a totally different thing for your wife to be diagnosed and to have to face that mortality of someone close to you. It's challenging.
So let's talk about your writing and your speaking, because you already had the gift and the interest in the writing. You just mentioned to us that was put on hold indefinitely while you were active before cancer. You had other things that you were taking care of, but you were speaking in those years. So writing and speaking is not a new territory for you at all.
No.
But breast cancer changed the course of that writing and speaking, didn't it?
Yes. Yeah. Originally, when the book first came out about 18 months ago, I was promoting the book and talking about my parents' story and, jumping in and, telling that again and again and again. But then as I began teaching classes at cancer centers and hearing more and more people's stories, I began to think, is there a way that I could help other people write down their cancer story, even if they never get it published? 1.7 million people last year heard the words, "You have cancer." And that's sobering. But there's 15.5 million cancer survivors in the United States alone. And then you talk about family members and people that love them that are touched by cancer. That's a huge, huge circle.
Yes.
And I found writing so helpful and healing for myself that I think there's just healing that comes when we can process what has happened to us through writing. So I wanted to see that happen for other people.
And you've got a program that you're just in the test phase of that. It's 6 weeks long, and it's called Reclaim Your Scattered Story, which I really like that visual image of the word scattered. That seems to really capture it, doesn't it? You must have worked on that, or did the Lord just bring it to you?
I think I had about 10 different titles, and then finally asked a group of friends, which one do you like? And they like the whole reclaim idea.
Yes.
That's a positive, moving forward type statement, and then scattered story. So yes, I'm in my very first test group with that, and I opened it up to just on my general Facebook page, and I only wanted 30 in the class, and it filled up in 3 days. And so yeah, we're working on it. It also includes a private Facebook group where they post what they've written to the group and share and get ideas from each other. And it's been healing for me, even in more layers, to read other people's stories and to realize that, yes, it makes a difference when we can share some of the hard moments with other people who have gone through cancer. So
it's very helpful, and it's cathartic to share your story, no matter what that story is, those dark times. And it also must be very, it's also helpful when someone acknowledges what happened to you wasn't right. That shouldn't have happened. Fill in the blank with whatever it is that you need, that you're going to find the words and the comfort and the support that you're going to hear or have access to in a group that you will not hear when you're by yourself and you don't reach out and allow people to participate in your life and your healing.
Yeah, at least what I found with my own cancer story is that doctors are very good at working on the medical side, as they should be, in the preparation of you surviving. That's their job. But they don't really prepare you for life after cancer, life after treatment, and they shouldn't, right? It's not their job. And so I found, and other people close to me that have had cancer, you look at your life and go, now what? Everything in my worldview has changed practically as I face my own mortality. And how do I want to live the rest of my life? And the lessons I've learned from having cancer, how do I want to implement them? And most people, will say, I never would have chose cancer, but this lesson that I learned, I want to go forward with that. I want to live a different life because I had cancer.
Yes, yes. If there probably are support groups and other ways to support cancer survivors in churches, but what would in your mind, what would an ideal program look like? How long would it be? What would it entail?
Some people I know aren't ready to talk about it right away. My parents went through hospice, and the particular one that they went through interestingly, they offered grief classes for family members up to a year. Up to a year after. And I would actually recommend it up to 2 years, because I think sometimes the first year you're just living all the firsts, and then after the anniversary you're like, okay, I'm still not processing well. Now I need to look at some things. Yeah, I think a support group should have opportunity where everyone in the room should be able to share and to say where they're at. A lot of people want to go specifically, if you've had breast cancer, you're only in a group for breast cancer survivors, for example. Otherwise, people go to general cancer support groups. But a hospital should have a list of that. And I know the website cancer.org, which is with the American Cancer Society, has lists all over the nation of support groups that are available in the communities where you would be living.
Good. I appreciate you mentioning that resource, because we did want to talk about, you are heavily involved in the American Cancer Society. You received an award from them just this year for your service. Tell us about that, please.
Yeah, I'm a 2018 Voice of Hope with the American Cancer Society. There's several of us around the nation. And we talk about the programs that are available through the American Cancer Society and the hope that there is as survivors, that more and more people are surviving from cancer. And we want to continue to see programs available and research so that we can find a cure for this thing.
Wouldn't that be the day?
Yeah.
That would be the day. So you do this exclusively by going and delivering presentations, or do you do it other ways as well? Radio interviews? How is that?
It's mainly presentations and going around the community here and talking to different groups that would invite me in to speak.
excuse me. And let's see, I had another question about that. Where was it? It will come. I thought I had another one. We talked about insurance. Oh, this is what it was. Thank you, Lauren. You had mentioned the word patient phrase, patient navigator at hospitals. Tell us what that means and where is that patient navigator that we might discover that person? And what do you ask them?
A patient navigator is a service offered through the American Cancer Society, but it doesn't even have to be specifically at the hospital that you're going to as a cancer patient. If there's one in the area, they can also set up an appointment with you and help you navigate the system. So help you with bills is a huge thing that they help you with, to find the resources available if you're struggling financially. But there's just so many more things that they do. Help coordinate your medical team, things like that. So yeah, ask around or Google it, see is there a patient navigator in your area, and then see if you can set up an appointment with them that can help you as an amateur to handle the professional system.
Because you had told me before that this is a whole new language that we have to learn. Yes. And then the paperwork and the insurance and all the stuff. And a lot of people have never dealt with that at all, or right. They have dealt with it just enough to push it out of the way so somebody else can deal with it. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you just got to get in there yourself. I really did not realize that the patient navigator was over a region or an area so that they could go where they're needed rather than being local to one's facility. That's a huge, huge thing.
Yeah.
And we can support them through supporting American Cancer Society.
Correct. Yeah. So they're actually on salary. So that would be one of the services that donations to the American Cancer Society provides.
Mm-mm-mm. You also, on your website, which viewers live or in the replay, we're going to be adding some resources, some links to website and Amazon author page so you can find this great book because you need to get this book. But you have several free resources on your website as well. Tell us about those, please.
One free resource I have is Dear Friend Who's Been Diagnosed with Cancer. It's just a one-page printable done in multiple colors that you can run off and just, hang it on your refrigerator or hang it by your desk as a reminder of some things that are true when you've been diagnosed with cancer. One thing is, you're allowed to fire a doctor that doesn't agree with you, and to tell each other that you love each other all the time. Mm-hmm. And there's just a list of those things. So that some I've learned the hard way, and some that other people have told me worked for them. So
I've got that link at it as well. So that day in your yard, let me check Facebook one more time, and we'll. Melinda Inman says patient navigator offer through American Cancer Society. She's helping us get the word out there. Cancer.org. She's got the list. Smart to offer classes for the aftermath. And I think we need to heal, don't we? We need a space to heal. Smart to offer Cancer.org. Yes. She's telling her mother that she loves her. She's being a good listener and telling her right now, her mother, that she loves her. Thank you very much for being with us today, Melinda. It's always good to see you. And that day, years ago, a decade ago, you were sitting in the front yard with your parents. The phone rang, and you found out. Yes. And you said at the time, in the end of your introduction, I think, that cancer. You couldn't speak to Kevin when he answered the phone at the church. Cancer had stolen your words, and you have a phrase now that encourages people not to let that happen. What are those words as we close in?
I like to say, don't let cancer steal your words, that you have a valuable story that needs to be heard, and to take the time and find ways that you can use your voice and to fight back. We all need ways to take control of our lives again. Mm-hmm. And whether that's wearing lipstick like my mom did, or telling jokes to the oncologist like my dad did, or researching clinical trials. All these things are ways that we fight back. And don't let cancer steal your words.
I love that. It's a beautiful thought, and it's rings truth, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Thank you very much for being here and sharing your story and your parents' story. It's still It's still going strong, and it will continue to as long as your books, your writing, and your story are out there. That must please you, does it?
Yeah, yeah. And to think that they're still touching people's lives.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like you had. It sounds like you had a blessed childhood, wonderful parents. Not perfect, but wonderful. I'll take wonderful. Would you?
I would agree. Yes.
Thank you, Lord, for good parents. We appreciate that. Thank you for being with us, Lynne.
Thank you, Patricia, so much.
It's an honor to be with you today. Let's see. Thank you. Oh, what about, didn't ask you about your future. Kevin is the mayor-elect. He's just recently gotten that responsibility and honor. And what about you? You're fixing to be the mayor's wife, but you've been the pastor's wife, so that's very, very similar in different ways. And what about your writing? Are you writing something else?
I am currently have a book on the back burner. I'm not working on it right now because I was focusing on the class. Mm-hmm. And so I'm hoping to find more time in the new year, and actually to make more time in the new year, because I never find it. It's always elusive. So to make a priority and work on a second book.
Well said. Well said. And we'd like to see you back when you're ready for that.
Wonderful.
Viewers, thanks so much for being with us. This has been Marketers on a Mission, episode 142, when 3 family members have cancer at the same time, with guest author Lynne Hartke. Tomorrow, author Marissa Henley joins us. She was diagnosed the day before her 34th birthday. Her children were 6, 4, and 18 months. God met her and her husband in their deepest need, and He will meet you in your deepest need. Join us tomorrow to hear Marissa's story. Until then, Lynne Hartke and I say goodbye.
Goodbye.